Hi, this is going to be a quick demonstration of using the if function and the absolute cell reference. As you can tell, I got a spreadsheet set up here for Gamble Accounting Firm, and they're going to be keeping track of their employees' weekly pay and taxes, Social Security, net pay, and then a bonus that they should receive at the end of the year. Now, I've already calculated what my weekly pay is going to be. And what I did was that I took the cell value of C6 and divided by 52 because there are 52 weeks in a year. Now, instead of me coming up to the formula bar and looking at it, I can hold down my control key and click the little squiggly mark next to your 1, and it will display the formula that way. Hit it again, does the same thing. Or the other way of viewing it, if you go to your formulas tab, and right here in the middle there's a button that says show formulas. Does the exact same thing. Click it again, takes you back to seeing your solutions. Now for taxes. There's two separate taxes. There's one for the assistants and there's one for the There's one for employees that make less than $35,000 and there's another for employees who make more than $35,000. Now I could come in here, equal salary, times it by, well, let's see here, that person is making 24.6, that's less than 35. Oh, okay, yeah, so I'll just times it by 0.12 because that's 12%. Well, here's the problem with this. What if Alex gets promoted and he gets a raise? That means I got to go back to Alex and redo his taxes again. So this is not a great formula. This is not ideal. It's good for short term, but for the long term, no. What I want to use is an if function because there's two possibilities that can happen here. If the employee is making less than $35,000, and the other choice is if the employee is making more than $35,000. So I'm going to come up here to my formulas tab and I can click on insert function or I can click on the little insert function button next to the formula bar. Now in my list it already shows if here. If it didn't, I come up here to the top, type in if, click go, brings up a listing. There's if at the very top already selected for me, so I click the OK. Brings up this little dialog box. I always like to put it to cover up the rest of the data because I only want to work with this one employee for right now. So I need a logical test. And a lot of times the word problem's already written it out for you. You just got to rewrite it in a way that the computer can understand it. So I said before, if the employee is making less than $35,000, they get taxed at 12%. Well, right there, that logical part. When I said less than 35%, well, what is less than 35%? That is their salary. And their salary is where? Very good. C6. So I'm going to put down C6 less than 35,000. Now, make sure you don't use a comma. Commas are used as separators, and I'll show you here in a second. Now, that's it. That's all the logical tests that we need to write. C6 is less than 35,000. If you look on the far right, it's saying true. Well, why is it saying true? Well, that's because the computer is already calculating it for you. It's taking the value that's inside cell C6 and plugging it into the logical test. So it's set. Now the computer is reading it as 24,650 is less than 35,000. Yeah, it's true. So now, our next line, the true statement. So when it is true, when that logical test is true, what's supposed to happen? Good memory, 12%. We are going to tax the employee at 12%. So we want to tax their weekly pay. So I'm going to click on the weekly pay of E6, and I'm going to multiply that by 12%. Now if the statement is false, so in other words, if, let's just say, for example, inside C6 was 40,000. 40,000 less than 35,000. Is that true or false? You said false? Good. So we're going to write our false statement here. So what's supposed to happen? What's that other choice? That's right. The employee who are making more than 35,000 a year, they get taxed at 19%. So I'm going to click on my weekly pay again and multiply it by 19%. And over here on the side, it's giving me the calculations already. So if it happens to be true, then it's $56.88 will display. If it's false, then it's $90.07. Let's find out. Click the OK. And, I like, since it is cash, we should have 2 decimal places here. So there we go. $56.88 comes up. The reason why? Because the employee is making less than 35,000. If for some reason he's making 32,000. No, sorry, I said 35. Making 36,000. The statement is changed now. Another reason why it's really good to use cell references. Did you notice that the weekly pay automatically calculated? So make sure you're using cell references. If for some reason you decide to use the actual value that's in the cell, so if you typed out 24,650 less than 35,000, then when the salary changes because of promotions or whatever the case may be, that means you got to go back to this formula and fix it, and to that formula, and so on and so forth, which is time consuming. So we want to make things as quick as possible. Now I also mentioned to you before in the logical test about when writing out C6 is less than 35,000, told you not to include commas. Well, if you take a look at the formula bar up here, right after that 35,000 is a comma. Well, I could, instead of bringing up that function argument box, I could write my formula out here. And it tells me how to actually write the formula. So the commas act as separators. It lets the computer know that, okay, here's the first part, here's my logical test. Okay, here's the next part, the true statement. And then here's the last part, the false statement. Helps organize the computer's thoughts. Then, if I'm ready, I can go ahead and fill and drag this down, get to everybody else. And the way I did that, I have my cell selected, there's this little green square, I click and hold, and I drag it down. Now, Social Security. We want to take out a certain percentage, in this case 5%, of their weekly pay goes towards Social Security. I could write equals their weekly pay and times it by 5%, just like it says up there in the cell. I hit enter, I get that amount. Then I'll just fill and drag for everybody else. Look at that, I got all my answers. But what if the government says, we're going to raise Social Security rate to 8.5%? Well, that didn't automatically change. So now I got to come back here and fix it here, and then I got to fill and drag it again. There's a better way of doing it. Oop, let me just get rid of that. Now, the other way of doing it, using cell references. Alright, so I'm going to click on my weekly pay of E6, and I want to multiply it, which the multiplication is the little asterisk, so if you hold down the shift key and the number 8, you get that. I'm going to click on B1, push enter. Okay, look at that. I got a result. Then I'm going to fill and drag. Oh, what's all this? I got zeros, I got the zero message, what's going on? Okay. Take a look at the formula bar. This one's taking the value of E10 and multiplying it by B5, which is our last name here. So when you fill and drag, it's going to copy the cells, the cell references, down by 1 as well. Well, I don't want that happening with B1. So I'm going to come back up here to my first Social Security. I'm going to come up to my formula bar. So after B1, I'm going to push the F4 key on my keyboard. Brings up $signs before the B and after the B. Means it's going to lock that cell into place. It's not going to change in the formula. Okay, so now I'm going to come back to my little fill and drag. I'm going to drag it down. And now I get all my results. I'm going to click on a cell just to prove it. Here we go. E8 times absolute cell B1. The net pay. Alright, so now we're getting taxes taken out. We're getting Social Security taken out from the weekly pay. We got to know how much we got to pay our employees. So this is a simple formula. There's a couple ways you can write this. The easiest one, which I like, is that you start off with your equal sign, click on E6, subtract taxes, subtract Social Security. That is one way of writing it. Another way of writing it is that taxes and Social Security is supposed to be taken out of weekly pay. So you could write it using our open parentheses. F6 plus G6, close the parentheses. So when the computer reads this and it sees the parentheses in there, it knows that, okay, first I gotta add F6 and G6, then after that I'm going to take that value and subtract it from E6. Like I said, either way works. Gets you to the same answer. But the one thing you shouldn't be doing is using the values. Use the cell references. Bonus time. Yay! So we wanted to reward our employees. Okay? So we want to give them a bonus of let's say if they're an assistant, they get a 15% bonus of their weekly pay. If they're a manager, they get 25% of their weekly pay. So again, right there, there's two possibilities, two things that can happen. What's a function that can help us with that? If. So once again, I'm going to use my if function. And this time, I'm not going to use the argument box. I'm going to just write it up here. And if you can tell, after I hit the equal sign and I start typing, a little box that pops up. That's called the IntelliList. So Microsoft is trying to predict what function you want to use. And it just happens to be this function. If it happened to be the if error function I wanted to use, I just use my arrow key and arrow down to it. But I want my if. So I go back up to it, and I'm going to push the tab key to select it. So another little box pops up, This one is kind of a guide. This one tells you, okay, this is the first thing you got to do. You got to put in your logical test. So, managers, they get 25%. Assistants gets 15%. And there's two ways of writing this formula. Well, actually, there's probably several. There's several ways of writing this formula involving the if. I guess, let me rephrase again. Several ways of writing out your logical tests. First of all, if you take a look, well, no, we can't do that because this person is making more than 35,000. So that's one thing of doing. You can look. Okay, well, where's the low point? Well, low point is 4290. So anybody who's making less than 42,900, well, they're going to be considered as an assistant. So I could click on cell reference here, or the C6, and I'll put down less than 43,000. Oops. Helps if I type right. So if it happens to be true, what's supposed to happen? They get 15% of their weekly pay. So I'm going to type that, E6, and multiply by 15%. If not, I'm going to take the weekly pay and multiply by 25%. So in other words, if they're making more than $43,000, then they should be getting a 25% bonus. Close my parentheses. I get, for this particular employee, $71.11. Now, another way that you could write it is that C6 is greater than 43,000. If you go that approach, you just flip-flop your true and false statements. Another way of doing it is that you're trying to find the difference between assistants and managers. Well, another beautiful thing of Excel is that you don't have to stick with numbers. You can use words. So for example, if I put down C6 equals, and when you want to use words and have it compare words, you need to start it with the double quotation mark. And then you type it the exact same way. Oops. Except I need to make sure that I'm actually using the right thing to look at. So I want it to look at my position. I don't want it to look at my salaries. So I'm going to click on assistant. So I get D6. I want it to equal assistant. I make sure the word assistant is in double quotation marks. I get $71.11 again. And then to finish this up, instead of like I've been doing, one column at a time, I can select multiple columns like this, and then I can drag and drop, or fill and drag, and I can get the rest of my formulas. And then at the very end, if I want to see all my formulas, all my good hard work, I can go to my Formulas tab, click Show Formulas, and I could play around with the adjustments here, and that way you can read it all just like me. So then when I grade your work, that's what I do. I turn on the Show Formulas and I look to see your formulas. Because quite honestly, I don't care what the solution is that comes up to it. It's more along the lines of what was your formula that you used to get to that solution. It's very similar to college algebra. They don't care how you got that answer. It's more along, well, let me rephrase, sorry. They care on how you got to that answer. They don't care that you got the right answer. They want to know how you got there. So that's the same way with me when it comes to Excel. I want to see how you got there.